They regret not believing you. When you spoke, they laughed. When you warned them, they turned their backs. When you told them what God had shown you, they called you foolish, dramatic, or lost. But now they see what you saw. Now they walk through the very storms you tried to help them avoid. And the same people who once doubted you now watch in silence as everything you spoke becomes truth. My friend, let me tell you something powerful. There will come a time when those who didn't believe you will regret not listening. Not because you wanted to be right, but because what you carried was not your own word, it was the whisper of God through your spirit. Every chosen one, every soul God has anointed walks through this valley of rejection. God gives you eyes to see beyond what others can see. He gives you discernment to understand things that are hidden. But when you speak of what's coming, when you reveal what He's placed in your spirit, they think you're imagining things. They can't see what you see because your vision is born in the secret place of prayer, in silence, in your tears, in your waiting. You are not ordinary. You are a vessel through which God reveals His warnings and His promises, and those who doubted you will one day witness how right you were, not because you desired to be right, but because truth cannot stay buried forever. Truth rises. There were nights you sat alone, asking yourself if you were crazy for believing what you believed. You questioned if you heard right. You wondered if maybe you should have stayed quiet. But the fire of conviction inside you would not let you rest. That was God keeping you awake, not in fear, but in purpose. He was molding you into a messenger, and the path of a messenger is never easy. Prophets were mocked, dreamers were laughed at, believers were doubted, but God always vindicates those who stand for truth. Let me tell you, sometimes God hides your worth until the appointed time. People don't see your value when you're walking through fire. They only see ashes. They don't recognize your wisdom when you're still learning obedience. They think your silence is weakness. But one day, they will remember your words. When everything they trusted in begins to crumble, when the truth starts to unfold, they will say, "You were right. You tried to tell us." And in that moment, you will not rejoice in pride, but you will bow your head in humility and whisper, "God, you did it." Because it was never about being believed, it was about being faithful to the vision God gave you. You see, when God gives you revelation, He doesn't give it to the crowd. He gives it to the faithful. He gives it to the ones who can carry the weight of rejection. Because not everyone can handle being misunderstood. Not everyone can walk alone and still stay loyal to what God said. That's why He chose you. That's why He gave you insight that others didn't understand. Because He knew you wouldn't sell the truth for popularity. He knew you wouldn't water down His message to fit in. He knew you would rather be lonely with Him than be accepted by those walking in darkness. They called you dramatic when you said God was separating you. They said you changed when you stopped entertaining the same things they did. But the truth is, you didn't change. You awakened. God opened your eyes. He removed the veil. He showed you what was hidden behind the smiles, behind the opportunities, behind the flattery. And when you spoke about it, they said you were judging or overthinking or being negative. But now, as their plans fall apart, as deceit is revealed, as masks are removed, they remember your words. They regret not believing you. Do you know why they regret it? Because what you carried was not opinion, it was revelation. What you spoke was not fear, it was wisdom. What you saw was not imagination, it was insight from God. The problem is, people only believe after the proof. They don't recognize faith until they see the fruit. But faith sees before sight. You believed before it happened. You saw before it manifested. That's what separates those chosen by God from those who only live by appearance. You were mocked for being too deep, too spiritual, too cautious, but in truth, you were walking in the spirit of divine awareness. There are moments when God allows disbelief to test your endurance. He lets them call you wrong so He can show that your validation comes from Him alone. Because if everyone agreed with you, you'd never learn to depend fully on His voice. Sometimes rejection is your confirmation. Sometimes their laughter is proof that you're carrying something they can't comprehend. Don't be angry when they don't believe you. Don't waste your energy trying to convince them. Let your consistency speak. Let your obedience speak. Because when God fulfills His word through you, their regret will be their awakening. There's something sacred about being misunderstood by people but understood by God. It builds spiritual strength. It makes your heart humble and your faith pure. You stop needing applause. You stop chasing validation. You stop explaining yourself because you realize in time, truth defends itself. You don't have to fight for it. You don't have to prove it. God Himself will prove it for you. And when He does, it won't just silence your doubters, it will elevate your faith. You'll see that every painful misunderstanding had a purpose. Every tear you cried for being rejected was watering the soil for your vindication. Some of you were warned by God to walk away from certain people, but they didn't understand why. You told them something felt wrong, something was off, but they thought you were paranoid. Yet months later, their hearts were broken, their peace destroyed, and they realized you were right. That's not coincidence. That's divine revelation. That's what happens when God speaks to His chosen ones. He gives them a sense that others don't have. And while others live by sight, you live by spiritual perception. And yet the world mocks perception. It loves visible proof. It honors what's seen, not what's discerned. But those who walk with God learn to trust the unseen. They learn to stand on conviction even when no one agrees. You may have been called strange, but the truth is you were anointed to see ahead. You were called to protect what others take lightly. You carry a divine radar that senses danger, that feels deception, that perceives shifts before they happen. And for that reason, you're often misunderstood. But that misunderstanding is your crown. It proves that you are walking on a higher spiritual frequency than the world around you. And now those who dismissed you are waking up to the truth. They regret not believing you because they finally see that your silence was wisdom, your distance was protection, and your warnings were love. You didn't speak out of pride, you spoke out of care. You didn't walk away because you were cold, you walked away because you were guided. And the same God who told you to move will one day cause them to see why He had to separate you. They will understand that your departure was divine preservation. It hurts when people don't believe you. It hurts when you try to protect someone and they push you away, but remember, God allows disbelief so that when He reveals the truth, His glory is magnified. When He exposes the reality you warned them about, no one will be able to deny that His hand was upon you. God doesn't waste your tears. He doesn't forget the pain of your rejection. In due season, He will turn it into your testimony. They regret not believing you because now they can see what you tried to protect them from. The same people who laughed at your conviction now whisper your name in awe. The same ones who thought your faith was too intense now seek the same God you trusted when everyone doubted you. That is the power of divine revelation. When God speaks to your spirit, it may not make sense to those still living in spiritual blindness. You saw through the surface. You sensed the unseen danger. You felt the shifting winds in your soul. You tried to warn them, not because you wanted control, but because you were guided by something higher than human understanding. There's a reason God doesn't reveal everything to everyone. Some hearts are too proud to listen. Some minds are too distracted to perceive. Some ears are too closed by the noise of this world to hear the still, quiet voice of truth. That's why He whispered to you. That's why He showed you things in your dreams, in your quiet moments, in your pain. He trusted you with spiritual insight because He knew you would carry it even when it cost you relationships. And when others turned away, God stayed near. When no one understood your silence, God understood your obedience. You were never alone. You were simply being set apart for something holy. Sometimes God allows disbelief to expose hearts. When people mock the truth, they reveal their own spiritual immaturity. They show that they trust the world's evidence more than God's guidance. And in time, regret becomes their teacher. Regret humbles the proud. It teaches the arrogant what listening to God's voice truly means. Many will only understand spiritual truth through the pain of consequence. But that's not your burden to carry. Your duty was to speak what you knew. Your job was to obey what you heard. What happens after is in the hands of God. Remember this: those who once called you strange will one day call you wise. Those who once ignored your warnings will one day seek your prayers, because God has a way of proving His servants right, not through argument, but through manifestation. When your discernment becomes visible truth, when the reality you predicted unfolds before their eyes, they will remember how calmly you stood. You didn't fight for attention. You didn't beg to be believed. You trusted that the one who sent you would justify you. And He did. Do not let their disbelief harden your heart. You were chosen to be light in a place that prefers darkness. That calling comes with misunderstanding. People who love comfort will always reject truth when it threatens their illusions. You may have tried to warn them about the wrong path, but they love the crowd too much. You may have tried to tell them that certain friendships were dangerous, but they didn't want to let go of their comfort. Yet when God starts shaking what they built without Him, they will finally understand what you meant. Regret opens the eyes of those who refused correction. But listen closely, your mission was never to be believed by everyone. Your mission was to stand firm in your obedience to God. If everyone had believed you, faith would not have been tested. If everyone had agreed with you, your courage would not have been proven. God allowed disbelief so that you would learn how to walk by conviction, not confirmation. He let them doubt so that your faith could grow roots in silence. You don't need applause when you have alignment with God. You don't need validation when you have revelation. When you walk with God, there will be seasons when people think you've lost your way, but in truth, you're simply walking a path too spiritual for their understanding. They can only see the road behind you, but you're already moving toward what they cannot yet imagine. God gives you a future insight so that you can prepare, pray, and protect what matters before the storm arrives. You were not paranoid, you were prophetic. You were not fearful, you were faithful. And because you listened to that inner prompting, you avoided destruction that others ran into blandly. Sometimes the regret of others is your silent vindication. You won't need to say a word. You won't need to point out their mistakes. The peace that now surrounds your life will be your proof. The calm that covers you when chaos breaks out will be your testimony. God will make it clear who walked in wisdom and who ignored the warning. So don't gloat. Don't wish for revenge. Let your peace speak louder than their regret. Let your stability reveal that you were walking with God all along. You must understand something divine. When God chooses to show you what others can't see, He's not trying to make you superior. He's calling you to responsibility. You were given insight to intercede, not to impress. You were warned so that you could pray for those who laughed. You were shown the danger not to run away in pride, but to stand in faith and say, God, protect them even though they don't believe. That's the mark of a true servant of God. Even when others doubt you, you still carry love in your heart. Even when they mock you, you still bend your knees for them, because you understand it's not them rejecting you, it's them rejecting what God placed within you, and God keeps record of that. He sees when you tried to help and were ignored. He sees when your intentions were questioned. He sees when you were blamed for caring too much. But the day is coming when He will turn the light on and every hidden thing will be revealed. The truth will stand tall while lies collapse. And those who once mocked your faith will say, surely God was with you. That's divine vindication, not born from pride, but from patience. The world often mistakes silence for defeat. But those who walk with God know that silence is power. While they were talking, you were praying. While they were laughing, you were listening. While they were doubting, you were discerning. And now, while they regret, you are rising. This is how God works. He allows time to unfold His truth. He doesn't rush to prove you right, because He wants your humility to mature before your vindication appears. When truth is finally revealed, your heart will be pure enough to handle it with grace. Do not underestimate what God is doing in secret. The people who didn't believe you are not your enemies. They are part of your testimony. Their disbelief is what pushed you closer to God. Their rejection made you stronger. Their silence forced you to depend entirely on divine strength. If they had believed you, you might have stayed comfortable. But their doubt made you deeper. Their absence made you prayerful. Their ridicule made you wise. Everything that hurt you was training you. Every rejection was a divine classroom. Every misunderstanding was a spiritual promotion. There will be moments when those who once ignored you will return seeking advice, and in that moment, you must not harden your heart. That is your test. Will you act out of bitterness or wisdom? Will you hold grudges, or will you show that you truly walk with God? Vindication without compassion is pride, but vindication with humility is power. When they come back to you broken and regretful, don't remind them of their doubt, remind them of God's mercy. Tell them, it wasn't me you should have believed, it was God speaking through me. That is how you lift His name, not your own. And hear me well, your story is not finished. The same God who allowed you to be doubted is now preparing to elevate you. Those who overlooked you will have no choice but to notice the light God is placing upon you. They won't understand how you're still standing after everything. They won't know how peace found you after pain. They won't know how you kept hope alive when everything around you looked hopeless. But you'll know it was God. It was His hand, His timing, His mercy. They regret not believing you because your silence spoke louder than their arrogance. They remember how calm you were when they mocked your convictions, how peaceful you remained when they dismissed your warnings. You didn't fight back, you didn't argue, you didn't try to prove yourself, you simply stood firm, anchored in what God had shown you. And now as the truth unfolds before their eyes, they realize you were never trying to win an argument, you were trying to save them from destruction. You were trying to help them see what God had allowed you to see. But blindness resists vision, and pride refuses wisdom. It takes spiritual maturity to recognize when God is speaking through another person. Many rejected your words because they didn't believe God could use someone like you. They saw your human flaws and forgot that God often hides His greatest messages in the mouths of those the world overlooks. They thought, who are you to warn me? Not realizing that God does not look at outward appearance, He looks at the heart. When you spoke, it wasn't your ego talking. It was divine insight flowing through your spirit. But they couldn't discern it, and now they stand in regret, realizing they mistook truth for arrogance and humility for pride. There will always be those who doubt what they don't understand. When God gives you vision, He doesn't explain it to everyone else. He explains it to you. He entrusts you with mysteries that others cannot handle. And because of that, you often feel isolated. You sit in rooms full of people, yet feel completely alone because no one seems to understand the fire burning inside you. But isolation is not punishment, it's preparation. God separates before He elevates. He hides before He reveals. He silences before He speaks loudly through your life. And those who didn't believe you in your silence will regret it when your transformation becomes undeniable proof of His hand upon you. Understand this deeply. Disbelief is not always personal, it's spiritual blindness. When truth threatens comfort, people close their eyes. When correction confronts pride, people block their ears. That's why many could not receive what you said. It wasn't because you were wrong, it was because they weren't ready. God's timing didn't match their desire for control. They wanted comfort, not conviction. They wanted flattery, not truth. But now, the same truth they rejected is unfolding before them like a mirror, and regret is forcing them to see what they once refused to accept. There's something powerful about being proven right by God's timing. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to say, I told you so. Time becomes your witness. Reality becomes your confirmation. And as the seasons shift, everyone who doubted you begins to see that what you carried wasn't emotion, it was revelation. What you spoke wasn't imagination, it was divine foresight. And what you endured wasn't punishment, it was preparation for a greater purpose. But don't let their regret turn into your pride. The moment you make their apology your victory, you lose sight of why God chose you in the first place. You were never meant to be a symbol of revenge, you were meant to be a vessel of mercy. When they come back to you with tears in their eyes, treat them with the same compassion that God showed you when no one believed in you. Show them what divine love looks like, not by words, but by your grace. Because in that moment, you are not proving yourself, you are representing God's patience. Many times, those who regret not believing you will become your biggest supporters later. They will learn through pain what you tried to teach through peace. They will finally understand that discernment is not arrogance, that obedience is not rebellion, and that silence is not weakness. They will look at your growth and say, "Now I see." And when they do, remember it was never about you. It was always about God showing them what faith looks like when it's tested, what obedience looks like when it's lonely, and what divine wisdom looks like when it's misunderstood. When God chooses to use you, He doesn't ask for permission from others. He doesn't wait for them to approve your calling. He simply begins to work in your life in ways that cannot be explained. He gives you peace when others panic. He gives you strength when others crumble. He gives you direction when others wander. And those who once called you strange will watch in awe as you walk through storms untouched, as you endure trials with unshakable faith. That's when regret becomes the seed of their awakening. Through your endurance, they see what real faith looks like. You see, the moment they regret not believing you is also the moment God begins to open their eyes. Regret is often the beginning of repentance. Sometimes people must experience the consequences of disbelief before they can embrace the reality of truth. They must lose what they idolized to recognize what they ignored. They must see the results of walking without divine guidance before they can truly value the warnings of those who walk with God. And that's where your role shifts from the rejected messenger to the example of restoration. When they return to you, don't remind them of their doubt, remind them of God's mercy. Don't say, "You should have believed me." Say, "Now you see why I believe God." That difference shows maturity. That difference reveals humility. That difference honors God instead of yourself. Because the goal of revelation is not to elevate the messenger, it is to glorify the one who sent the message. You were never called to be right, you were called to be faithful. And faithfulness always brings vindication, even if it takes time. The same people who ignored you will one day tell others how your faith inspired them. The same ones who gossiped about you will defend your name. The same ones who called you dramatic will one day call you wise. Because truth has a strange way of reversing opinions. God has a way of turning misunderstanding into testimony. Those who once mocked you will say, "We didn't see it before, but now we understand." And in that moment, you'll see that everything you went through was worth it. Every tear, every moment of silence, every rejection, it was all part of God's divine plan to show His glory through your endurance. Never forget, your calling will always be tested by disbelief. Every divine voice faces worldly opposition. Every message from God encounters human resistance. But that's what makes your faith powerful. You continued to believe even when no one else did. You stood alone, yet you never felt truly alone, because deep down you knew God was with you. And that presence is what sustained you when words failed, when people turned cold, when doors closed. You held on to something eternal when everything else was temporary. That's why regret will never break you, it will only confirm you. And now, God is bringing you into a season of divine revelation. The same eyes that once looked down on you will now look up to you for wisdom. The same hearts that doubted you will now seek your prayers. But remember, your assignment is to lead them back to God, not to yourself. Show them that belief is not about trusting human ability, it's about surrendering to divine truth. Tell them, "I am nothing without the one who guided me. What I saw, what I spoke, what I knew, it all came from God." That's how you stay pure. That's how you stay anointed. That's how you keep your spirit humble, even when the world begins to notice you. Those who regret not believing you will never forget the peace you carried when they mocked you. That peace was your protection. That stillness was your strength. And that composure was proof that you were walking with God. You didn't need to defend yourself because you knew who defended you. You didn't need to prove your truth because truth doesn't need defending, it only needs time. And now, time has proven everything you said. They regret not believing you, and you have no bitterness left, only gratitude. Gratitude that you listened. Gratitude that you obeyed. Gratitude that God never left you, even when everyone else did. They regret not believing you because now they understand that what you carried was not ordinary. It wasn't opinion. It wasn't emotion. It was the quiet, weighty power of truth that only comes from walking closely with God. You spoke not from your own understanding, but from divine awareness that comes to those who listen when the world is loud, who pray when others complain, who trust when everything seems uncertain. You didn't speak because you wanted attention. You spoke because silence would have been disobedience. You felt that inner push in your soul, that unmistakable conviction that said, warn them, even if they won't listen. And now, as life unfolds, your warnings echo in their memories, your words replay in their minds, and they realize you were guided by something greater than yourself. It's a strange thing, isn't it? The same people who once thought you were exaggerating now confess that you were right. They see what you saw. They feel what you felt. They walk through what you tried to protect them from. And in that moment, they don't just regret ignoring your words, they regret ignoring the voice of God that spoke through you. Because when God speaks through a person, rejecting that voice is not rejection of the messenger, it is resistance to the message. They thought they were dismissing you, but in truth they were dismissing divine wisdom sent to help them. You see, when God gives you discernment, it often isolates you. You start to see through people, through situations, through illusions. You begin to sense what others overlook. You start feeling uneasy in places you once felt comfortable because your spirit begins to recognize what your eyes cannot see. And when you try to explain this awareness, people don't understand. They say you're overthinking. They say you're being too cautious. They say stop worrying so much. But what they don't know is that you are not being fearful, you are being spiritually alert. God has opened your inner eyes, and with that sight comes a responsibility to respond, even when it makes you look strange. But now they see. Now they understand why you pulled away from certain people, why you stopped going certain places, why you became quiet in certain conversations. You weren't being distant, you were being directed. You were not avoiding them, you were avoiding destruction. God was guiding you out of traps before they were even visible. And those who once accused you of being cold-hearted now realize it was protection, not pride. They regret misunderstanding your silence. The truth is, there are seasons when God will make you invisible to those who can't walk with you into the next phase of your life. He will make them doubt you, not to destroy you, but to disconnect you from environments that would suffocate your purpose. Sometimes disbelief is divine separation. When people don't believe in you, you're free from their influence. When they reject your message, you're released from their expectations. God allows rejection not to shame you, but to shield you, because He knows that if everyone accepted you, you would never learn how to walk by faith alone. Let them regret, let them learn, because regret is often the beginning of revelation. God uses their disbelief to teach them humility. He lets them walk through consequences so they can see the truth they ignored. And when they finally understand, their regret becomes your confirmation that you were always on the right path. That's why you don't need to chase their validation. You don't need to say, I told you so. You just need to keep walking, keep shining, keep standing firm. Because God Himself is your witness and time is your proof. You must understand this. When God gives you a word, it will always sound impossible to those who live by logic. When God gives you a vision, it will always sound strange to those who live by sight. That's why disbelief is natural to the crowd. They cannot see what faith sees. But you, the one who believes without evidence, are walking on a higher level of trust. You move not because it makes sense, but because God said so. And in time, when everything unfolds exactly as you were shown, they will remember how you stood in conviction when they wavered in confusion. There is divine power in being misunderstood for righteousness. Every great servant of God faced disbelief before vindication. Those who walked in truth were always rejected by those comfortable in lies. That's the price of carrying revelation. You will walk alone, misunderstood, misjudged, and unappreciated, but in the end, your obedience, will speak louder than their opinions. The truth will rise like the dawn, and no amount of darkness can cover it. God will not allow His truth to remain hidden forever. So when they regret not believing you, don't see it as your victory, see it as God's justice. Because when He confirms your truth, He's not trying to prove you right. He's showing the world that those who walk with Him will never be put to shame. That's His promise. He will never let your faith end in embarrassment. He will never let your obedience end in confusion. He will always bring clarity out of chaos, light out of silence, vindication out of rejection. You didn't lose when they didn't believe you. You grew, you matured, you learned how to rely completely on God's confirmation instead of human validation, and that is priceless. Because now, even if no one listens, you will still obey. Even if no one claps, you will still speak. Even if no one agrees, you will still stand, because you've learned that your strength comes from the one who never leaves you, not from the crowd that changes with every season. Those who regret not believing you are part of a bigger story. Their disbelief was meant to strengthen your discernment. Their rejection was meant to refine your purpose. You became wiser through their ignorance, stronger through their doubt, and more faithful through their denial. What hurt you became your teacher. What wounded you became your wisdom. What isolated you became your intimacy with God. That's why you must thank God even for disbelief, because it taught you how to hear His voice louder than the noise of others. There is coming a time when those who regret not believing you will try to align themselves with you again. They'll want to reconnect, to stand near what they once resisted. And in that moment, you will have a choice to remind them of their failure or to remind them of God's forgiveness. Choose forgiveness. Choose grace. Because the moment you return love for rejection, you reflect the very nature of the one who carried you through it all. You rise above bitterness. You become proof that God's power is not just in revelation, but in restoration. Let your humility become your greatest sermon. Let your endurance become your loudest testimony. Let your peace become your proof that walking with God was worth every misunderstanding. Because when the truth finally unfolds, everyone will see what you already knew. That God's guidance never fails, that His warnings are never empty, and that His chosen ones are never mistaken when they obey His call. So don't look back in anger. Don't look back in pride. Look back with gratitude. For every moment they doubted you, God was watching. For every word they dismissed, God was recording. For every tear you shed in silence, God was counting. And when the appointed time arrived, He turned your pain into power, your rejection into recognition, your struggle into strength. And now their regret is not your burden, it's your confirmation that you were always led by divine wisdom. Keep moving forward, keep listening, keep trusting. Let God continue to speak through you, because the same power that once made you misunderstood is the same power that will make you unshakable. The same faith that once made you lonely is the same faith that will make you unstoppable. And when they finally see what you always knew, when they come to you in humility and say, "We should have believed you," lift your eyes to the heavens and say quietly, "It wasn't me they needed to believe, it was you, God." Because that has always been the truth. It was never about your words, it was about His will. It was never about your vision, it was about His plan. You were never the center of the message, you were simply the messenger. And every messenger carries a season of rejection before a season of recognition. But when that season shifts and truth stands, visible to all, you will know deep in your heart that every lonely night, every ignored warning, every painful misunderstanding was worth it. Because through it all, you walked with God, and that is the greatest vindication of all. When you walk with God, you begin to see that everything happens under divine order. Nothing is random, nothing is wasted, and nothing escapes His control. The disbelief of others was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to display how deeply anchored your faith truly is. God allows people to doubt you so that you may learn to depend on Him completely. Because if everyone believed in you, you might never have discovered the beauty of walking by faith and not by sight. Their disbelief created a divine silence, and in that silence, you learned to hear God's whisper more clearly than the crowd's applause. When God reveals something to your heart, not everyone will understand it, because revelation is not for the masses, it's for the faithful. God speaks to hearts that are ready to obey, not to ears that only want to hear. That's why some people missed the message. When you spoke, they were listening with logic, not with spirit. They were measuring divine truth with human reasoning. But the wisdom of God cannot be contained in ordinary understanding. His ways are higher, His timing is precise, and His voice often speaks where pride refuses to listen. Those who regret not believing you are actually witnessing the results of divine timing. They are watching how every word you spoke, every warning, every vision, every intuition is unfolding exactly as God planned. It's not coincidence, it's confirmation. And that confirmation serves not just to prove you right, but to reveal that when a person truly walks with God, their discernment becomes a light in a world full of deception. What you saw before anyone else saw, what you felt before anyone else felt, was God giving you foresight, an unseen map of what was coming. That gift of insight was not meant for pride, it was meant for purpose. And here's the truth. Sometimes God hides your worth in seasons of disbelief. He allows people to overlook you, ignore you, or underestimate you because He is protecting you from premature exposure. If they had believed you too soon, they might have corrupted what God was still forming in secret. So He kept you hidden, rejected, doubted, and misunderstood until the time appointed for your revelation. When God finally brings you into the light, no one can deny it, because the proof of His hand upon your life becomes too visible to question. There are moments when God will make the truth so clear that even your doubters will have no choice but to acknowledge it. They won't need to hear you speak. They'll see it in your peace, in your stability, in the way everything they thought would break you only made you stronger. That's when they realize you weren't depending on them, you were depending on God. Your strength came not from being believed, but from believing in Him. You stayed calm when they mocked you because you trusted that God would vindicate you in His time. You stayed humble when they doubted you because you knew the truth doesn't need to shout, it only needs time. God's justice moves slowly, but perfectly. He never rushes to prove a point, but when He moves, He makes the truth undeniable. And when He vindicates you, He doesn't just show the world that you were right, He shows the world that trusting Him is never in vain. Every delay becomes part of His design. Every rejection becomes part of His redirection. Every misunderstanding becomes a setup for revelation. This is how God works quietly, patiently, but with precision that humbles every human assumption. You may not have realized it, but God was testing your heart through their disbelief. He was watching to see if you would still trust Him when others called you wrong. He was watching if you would still remain kind when others spoke harshly. He was watching if you would still pray for them when they dismissed you. And you did. You chose faith over frustration. You chose humility over pride. You chose silence over argument. That's why God is now lifting you, because He saw your restraint when you could have defended yourself. He saw your patience when you could have fought back. He saw your endurance when you could have walked away. The truth is, those who didn't believe you were part of your divine training, their doubts strengthened your conviction. Their rejection made your foundation unshakable. Their mockery forced you to find your confidence in God alone. You stopped needing external validation because you learned that divine truth is self-sustaining. It does not collapse under disbelief. And when the time came, God Himself became your witness, your defender, your proof. Now, you are living what others refuse to see. You are walking in what you once spoke about in faith. You are standing in the manifestation of what was once invisible. This is what it means to walk with God. You declare what He shows you before it exists. You endure the doubt of others, and then you live to see His word fulfilled. And when that fulfillment comes, no one can deny it. It silences your critics and glorifies your Creator. So don't be angry with those who regret not believing you. Pity them, for they had the chance to see through faith, but they chose to wait for evidence. And evidence always arrives too late. It only confirms what faith already knew. Faith walks ahead, regret follows behind. You walked ahead because you trusted God's voice. They followed behind because they trusted only what they could see. But now the truth stands clear. There will always be people who doubt what God places in your heart, but you must never let their disbelief make you doubt your connection with Him. The same God who revealed the unseen to you will continue to guide you into greater wisdom. You must remain still, focused, and unwavering, because the more you obey, the more He will reveal. And one day, those who doubted you will not only regret it, they will seek your counsel, because they will recognize that the wisdom of God was speaking through you all along. So lift your head high. Don't dwell on their regret, dwell on your reward. God saw your faithfulness when no one else did. He saw your courage when no one else understood. He saw your purity of intention when others misjudged your silence. And He will honor that, not in ways you expect, but in ways that will astonish even you. Because when God decides to vindicate someone, He doesn't whisper it, He makes it visible. He makes the same mouths that doubted you speak of your strength. He makes the same eyes that ignored you witness your rise. And when that moment comes, do not gloat, do not boast. Simply look upward and say, God, all along it was you, because it was His guidance that set you apart. It was His protection that kept you from the wrong paths. It was His light that revealed what others could not see. And it was His wisdom that gave you strength to keep walking when everyone else stopped believing. This is the journey of those who are chosen, believed by few, tested by many, but proven by God alone. And when the world finally sees the truth, you will understand why the disbelief was necessary. Because it was never about them believing you, it was about you believing God. That's where true power lies.